Today, I'm going to touch upon the subject of mindfulness and the Bhagawad Geeta. Every religious process has at least three components. One is an overarching philosophy of life, which explains who am I, who is God, why am I here, why do bad things happen to good people. This is the philosophy of life. And of course, the Bhagavad Gita is replete of this. The second thing is that every religious process gives you instruction on how one must believe in, one must behave in society. So there are some things you may do, some things you may not do. And therefore, there are certain rules and regulations of conduct that one needs to follow. And the third is there needs to be a meditative process. And this meditative process is that which helps us to fix our minds upon God. And it also helps to relieve us from human suffering. So while every religion has a meditative process, the Bhagavad Gita actually teaches you how to make your whole life a meditation. It is not that we have to pray 5 times a day or 10 times a day or twice a day or thrice a day. The Bhagavad Gita wants us to be continually conscious of God. Bhagavad Gita wants us to be continually conscious of Krishna. This is why it is called Krishna consciousness. Now, when we are trying to be continually conscious of God, there are many ways by which we may be continually conscious of God. The essence of it is that we need to be continually engaged in what is known as yajna. Yajna means sacrifice. And we have to make our whole life a yajna. We have to make our whole life a sacrifice. And when we make our whole life a sacrifice, this whole life becomes a sacrament that is offered to God. Now, the word mindfulness, of course, indicates that your mind should be fully on what you're doing. But in a sense, this mindfulness means that you have to learn how to switch from mindlessness to mindfulness. We must learn how we need to switch off from that part of the brain and system which is constantly seeking to reconstruct, repair, and obsess over I, me, and myself. and how we can switch that mind from I, me, myself to remembering God. Remembering God is focusing on something as a sacrifice to the Lord. So the two primary methods that are, of course, the Bhagavad Gita gives many methods. The fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you will find many forms of yajna or sacrifice. But essentially, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita in its entirety, rather than trying to zero down on one chapter or another chapter, if you take the Bhagavad Gita in its entirety, the primary method that the Bhagavad Gita gives for remembering God and forgetting oneself is to be engaged in your swadharma, or to be engaged in your work. Of course, our subcontinent has been full of religions, just like Silicon Valley is full of startups. In our country, this subcontinent was full of startup religions. And many of them are alive today. And all of them, the entire basket of them, the commonwealth of those religions, comes under a single heading, which those outside the subcontinent speak of as Hinduism. So Hinduism is a commonwealth of religions that have taken birth on this subcontinent. And all of them have their own methods of bringing your mind on God, how to remain mindful, how to become free from suffering. But my friends, the Bhagavad Gita has a special method, and this method is unique to the Bhagavad Gita. That uniqueness of the Bhagavad Gita is that functioning in the material world through the performance of your duties is non-different from spiritual activity, provided you do it in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God. This is a very important concept. And the very important concept is that you can keep doing whatever you're supposed to be doing. You keep doing your duty. You keep fulfilling your responsibilities. You keep fulfilling all responsibilities. Your work responsibilities, your social responsibilities, your family responsibilities, your parental responsibilities, your filial responsibilities, all responsibilities you fulfill. But you do that in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God. And as you do this in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God, you get the benefits of spiritual salvation. You become purified. Even if you are a yogi, you continue to work within the world. कायेन मनसा बुद्धया केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति संगम त्यक्त्वा आत्मशुद्धये. Very clearly he points out, Krishna, that yes, yogis also work. And how do these yogis work? They work with their bodies, they work with their mind, they work with their intellect, they work with their senses. They work with all aspects of themselves. And they do it for what? Not for earning money, which is a useful side effect. They do it for the sake of their purification. So when they are doing their everyday duties, everyday responsibilities, they are pleasing God because they're doing it in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God. And because they're doing it with that amount of sincerity and sacrifice, they are pleasing the world as well, which means that you are pleasing God and you are pleasing the world. What can be better than that? Contrary to what you might hear elsewhere, it is important to note that Krishna believes this is a superior method to renouncing the world, which was recommended by many of this potpourri of religions that existed at that time. Sanyasastu mahabhavo dukkham aptuma yogatah yoga yukta munir brahma na chirena adigacchati. Krishna clearly explains that for those who abandon the world without having attained union with God, they get only sorrow. But those who work in the world in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, they attain the supreme without any delay. Sannyasas karma yogascha nihashriyasya kara ubhav tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Yes, you can attain salvation both by working in the world with devotion and also by renouncing the world. But between the two, working in the world with devotion is by far superior. In fact, Krishna says, Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana abhyarchaya siddhim vindati manavaha. By performing your God-given duties in a spirit of sacrifice to this all-pervading Lord, you will attain perfection. Indeed, this is the path, this is the way. And of all methods that we have available to us in this grab bag of meditational techniques that comes from this commonwealth of religions which we call Hinduism, this work as the means of salvation is by far the most superior. Looking at it from the neuroscience perspective, you must understand that indeed, when your mind is not working, it is working against you. When your mind is not engaged in tasks, it is engaged in your destruction. It is engaged in multiplying your suffering. Because when the mind is not engaged in tasks, it is engaged in what we call as the task negative network in the brain. The electrical activity in the brain has got what is known as the task negative circuit. The task negative circuit is also known as the default circuit of the brain. And that default circuit of the brain is also known as the social cognition network of the brain. And this network of the brain that is task negative, that is working when you are not engaged in tasks, This activity that it is engaged in is constantly working on I, me, myself. What will happen to me? How should I have responded to that person? How will I respond to that other person? What should I do in the future? What did happen to me? What happened to me in the past? And so on and so forth. The mind races between three things. It races into the future, it races into the past, it also races into I, me, and myself. These are the three loci in which the mind keeps wandering. This is the courtyard in which your mind plays when you are not engaged in working that mind. It goes into the past, it goes into the future, and if it is in the present, it starts thinking of Mera kya hoga, mujhe kya milega, what will happen to me, what will I get, etc., etc., etc. But when you are engaged in working, when you are engaged in what we call as task positive network, the task positive network puts your mind in a different circuit. It takes the mind off thoughts of self. It takes the mind off thoughts of I, me, and myself. And this removal of the pressure of thinking of self gives you immediate relief from suffering. When you are suffering, the best thing you can do is to engage your mind in working. Because when you engage your mind in working, you get relief from suffering. Many people believe that, oh, if I've lost a near and dear one, I should take time off work and stay at home. You'll suffer more. But if you come back to work immediately and engage yourself in working, that task positive network will save you from suffering. So thinking is the problem, action is the solution. Thinking is the cause of all despair, and action is the solution to all despair. When that action is done in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God, when you remember God constantly in what you are doing, when whatever you're doing for God, not for self. Therefore, all people who are devoted to God, people who understand the meaning of the Bhagawad Geeta, engage themselves in constantly performing actions and activities where their duties are fulfilled and surpassed, and indeed their minds are at peace because they're doing them as a yajna, as a sacrifice to please God. So my suggestion to you is, what the Bhagavad Gita suggests is that you must work. Bhagavad Gita rejects the abandonment of the world, the wearing of orange robes, the giving up of your duties towards your parents and your family, your wife, your children. It advises you to continue to work in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion. And these actions that you perform in the performance of your duty when offered to God bring you tremendous peace and relief from suffering. And what's more, when you are not working, Krishna says, don't stop doing things for God. Keep yourself in a task positive network by doing everything for God. Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat johosi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi, kaunteya, tat purushvamadarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything Krishna says, do it for me. Do it in a spirit of sacrifice, do it in a spirit of devotion. Do it in a spirit of self-forgetfulness. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has a solution for suffering. And that solution for suffering is both beneficial for you spiritually, because it relieves your suffering, and materially, because when you perform your duty as you are expected to, you truly satisfy the world. You satisfy the world and you satisfy God. Andha tama pravashyanti avidyam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo ya vidyam rataha. Those who pursue materialism alone go into great darkness, and those who pursue spirituality alone go into even greater darkness. So says the Ishopanishad. But those who pursue the material and the spiritual side by side like the two wings of a bird, such people are happy in this world and the next, saith the Bhagavad Gita. So whatever you do it for God. Divinize your life. Spiritualize your activities. Make your whole life into a meditation upon God. Put your full attention on the activities you perform and make sure that these activities you perform, your attention is fully upon them and not upon anything else. If your mind wanders to something else, bring it back. If your mind wanders to something else, bring it back. Be absorbed in the work that you are doing. Remain absorbed in the work that you're doing. So the question arises, when, sure, I'm doing everything for God, but when I have time where I'm not working, when I have discretionary time, what do I do? When you have discretionary time to keep your mind upon God and to make you forget yourself, engage in a yajna. Which yajna? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, Yagna nam japo yagnosmi. Krishna says, of all forms of yajna, I am that chanting of the holy name. And the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad points out that Harer Nam, Harer Nam eva kevalam, kalau nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranjita. Always chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. There is no other way in Kali Yuga, there is no other way in Kali Yuga, there is no other way in Kali Yuga. And in the Kali Santarana Upanishad, which is the Upanishad for the age of Kali, it declares Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Iti Shodh Shakam Nam Nam Kali Kalmashu Nashanam Nata Paratarapaya Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. By chanting these 16 words, your you will get you will find within it all the essence of all spiritual knowledge. But how to be mindful when doing japa? Well, that I will cover next. But for now, I would like you to remember that always keep working, keep doing your duty, fulfill all your responsibilities. Then you will be the true yogi, you will be the true sannyasi, even though you live within the world, just like a lotus lives within the water but never gets wet. Brahmanya adaya karmani sangam tyakta karoti yaha. Lipyate na sa pape na padma patram ivamasi. So all your offerings that are given to Brahman, to God, the all-pervading Lord, these offerings that are made to the all-pervading Lord, they will see that you are untouched by all sin, you are untouched by all karma. And just like the lotus leaf lies within water and does not get wet, so also you will not be tainted by the world, even though you function in the world performing all your duties and activities. This is so important. And about chanting of the holy name, how one must do it mindfully, and why your chanting is ineffective sometimes, that will be covered next time. If you have any queries or questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask me any questions that you might have. There any questions that anyone has? All right. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hari Om.